Say I've been highly impressed by what I've seen. It's not a little university. You have quite a substantial university here, not just in terms of the physical infrastructure that I've seen, but the very vibrant student population. We were governed by the laws of apartheid from childhood. You, as an Indian, you had to stay in residential areas designated for Indians. It's not the clothes that you wear that defines you. You must start being the architects of your future yourself. In South Africa, in 1984, we founded the World Conference on Religion and Peace, the South African chapter. As you know, the history of Indians in South Africa, they went to South Africa starting in 1860 as indentured laborers. So my history goes back to my great-grandparents. Then coloureds were given a certain beach and only coloureds could go there. Travelling in public transport, Indians had to travel in buses for Indians.
Hello everyone and welcome to Woxsen Podcast. I am Yashwata and I have with me today the guest of honor, His Excellency Mr. Anil Sooklal. He has been an academician and now a diplomat. He has also been the voice of South Africa in various platforms, the likes of G20 and BRICS. It is a privilege and an honor to welcome Ambassador Sooklal in the studios of Woxsen today. Let's have a quick chat. So, Ambassador, welcome to Woxsen and welcome to this podcast. You must have been to various international conferences, sir. I really hope that you're enjoying our little university so far.
Well, firstly, Yashwita, let me thank you for the invitation to be at Woxsen University. I've had a tour of parts of the university this morning, and I must say I've been highly impressed by what I've seen. It's not a little university. I think you have quite a substantial university here, not just in terms of the physical infrastructure that I've seen, but the very vibrant student population, as well as the faculty members that I've interacted with since this morning, has deeply impressed me. It's a very vibrant place. It's a very conducive environment for higher learning. And I think it's a conducive environment where future leaders of India will come from.
Those were quite inspirational words, and your profile is equally inspiring to not just me and also the audience who are eager to hear you. So let's start right from the beginning. I am interested to know that you've done your studies in Oriental study and religious history. So what drew you to these subjects?
Well, look, my journey in terms of my education has been in various directions because I had multiple interests. I started my university education studying fine arts, and I had a deep interest in art and philosophy. And subsequent to that, I started teaching art at a high school in Durban in South Africa. But at the same time, I wanted to continue my studies, so I enrolled for a degree majoring in science of religion, which is a study of world religions, as well as Oriental studies, which is a study of Oriental history. I was always fascinated by Asia in general, and not just its history, but also by its culture and philosophy. And I found that looking for the right fit in terms of the cause of my studies, these two disciplines appealed to me. And therefore I pursued a degree with my majors in science of religion and Oriental studies, and continued thereafter into postgraduate studies. I did my first PhD in religious studies, which focused on the Ramakrishna mission in South Africa. And I did much of my research here in India, coming to Kolkata to study the work of Swami Vivekananda, Mother Sharda, Sri Ramakrishna, and the whole Neo-Vedanta movement. Having completed that degree, I got a job at the University of South Africa in the Faculty of Theology, which was the largest faculty of theology at a South African university then. But as you know, a faculty of theology is focused on Christian theology. So they decided to expand the scope of the faculty and teach what they called Indian religions. And given my focus on the religions emanating from India, they employed me as an academic responsible for teaching Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, which form part of my studies. But at the same time, I was very keen to also pursue further studies on the history part of my interest. So I enrolled for a second PhD in Oriental Studies. The focus of my thesis was on the Gupta Empire. I lectured thereafter at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which is in the town I was born in Durban. While I was busy with my lecturing career, I was also involved in South Africa's liberation struggle. I was a political activist associated with the liberation movement of the time. I also was very keen on international relations. I traveled extensively in my capacity as an academic. I had interaction and contact with leaders of the African National Congress in exile, and were together with Archbishop Tutu and several other leaders from the religious community in South Africa. In 1984, we founded the World Conference on Religion and Peace, the South African chapter, which basically brought together leaders of the various faith communities in South Africa to collectively agitate and fight for our liberation from the faith communities. So I was very fortunate to be part of that founding structure and served on the executive of that organization. And my political activism and association with the liberation struggle also gave me the opportunity. As you know, South Africa was suspended from the United Nations because of apartheid. But when President Mandela was released from prison in 1990, South Africa was again being embraced by the international community. So in preparation for our readmittance into the United Nations, I was fortunate to be chosen by the political party, the ANC, to be one of the people to visit the United Nations on a study tour. So that gave me an exposure to the UN. I was very keen to be part and parcel of the UN system and learn more about it. So I went back on a scholarship where I got a certificate in human rights from the UN Center for Human Rights in Geneva. And I went back again for the third time to do a 3-month internship in the Center for Human Rights. And while I was at the Center for Human Rights in 1994, we became a democracy. And I received a call from a colleague from the African National Congress that was voted into power at our first democratic elections to say that they would like me to come and join government as a diplomat. So I resigned my post at the university and then became a diplomat. So that's my journey of how I transited from an academic into diplomacy.
So I've heard quite a lot about your professional, diplomatic, and academic life. Now, how was it growing up as an Indian during apartheid?
Well, look, I am born and raised in South Africa. I was born into apartheid. But as you know, between 1860 and 1911, about 152,000 Indians went to South Africa as indentured laborers. About 70% of them, after the completion of the period of 10 years as indentured laborers, they had the choice to return to India or to remain in South Africa. And many of them, about 70%, remained and decided to make South Africa the home. So that's how I am in South Africa today, because my great-grandparents decided to remain in South Africa. So As I said, I was born into an apartheid regime, and it's difficult as a child to understand why you are treated differently because you're of a certain skin color. Because South Africa, apartheid means separateness based on the color of your skin. And South Africa was widely divided into two categories, as white and black. So the white community were mainly made up of the white settlers that came to South Africa from the Netherlands, from the UK, from France, from other parts of Europe, and made South Africa the home. And the apartheid regime was a white-run regime. The majority community, the majority of South Africans are of African origin, 80% plus, and then you have the so-called colored community and the Indian community. These were the three strains of what was categorized as black South Africans. So we were governed by the laws of apartheid from childhood. You, as an Indian, you had to stay in residential areas designated for Indians. You had to attend schools that were only for Indians. Even university, you had to attend a university that was created only for Indians. So the whole idea of apartheid is separateness, to keep race groups apart. So you'd not have contact with other races, by and large, but only live and interact with your own community. And this was done deliberately by the apartheid regime to separate communities and not let them naturally interact as human beings and become part of an integrated society. The whole idea was to keep you separated and keep you divided. But of course, this didn't quite work because as the majority black community, we all recognized that we live under an unjust system, an inhumane system that discriminates on you on the basis of your skin color, not on your ability as a human being. And the whole liberation movement was a vibrant movement of which the Indian community was very much part of, even though we were a very small part of South Africa's population. But I think in the case of South Africa, we were fortunate in that Gandhi came to South Africa in 1893 under a specific mandate as a lawyer to assist in a legal case, a commercial dispute. But Gandhi himself was to be transformed. He spent 21 of his formative years. He came there, he was just around 24 years old, very young mind. But by the time he left 21 years later, it was a mature Gandhi, but a very transformed Gandhi, highly politicized, who experienced firsthand racism, discrimination, and exploitation based on your skin color. And of course, Gandhi left a legacy in that he founded the first political organization in South Africa, the Natal Indian Congress. But equally important, as much as Gandhi impacted on South African society and helped to conscientize people to fight against injustices and unrighteousness and discrimination, South Africa left an indelible mark on Gandhi because Gandhi came to South Africa as a young lawyer. But 21 years later, when he came back to India in 1915, it wasn't Gandhi the barrister. It was Gandhi, the freedom fighter. It was Gandhi, the philosopher, because two things happened in South Africa as far as I'm concerned regarding the transformation of Gandhi. Or maybe three. Firstly, there was a physical transformation. Gandhi came there as a very well-attired, British-educated Indian, always in a suit, very well-dressed. By the time he left South Africa, he was no longer wearing a suit. He was wearing his dhoti. Yeah. And he was wearing simple attire. And I think that itself carries a message of the simplicity that he signified. It's not the clothes that you wear that defines you, but that gives you importance. I think that Gandhi recognized that. He deliberately chose to dress as the masses dress, to identify with them. But secondly, Gandhi transformed into a philosopher from a lawyer. because his very philosophy of satyagraha and ahimsa were formulated in South Africa based on the experiences he had in South Africa that got him to reflect on what is the true purpose of life and how do you fight against injustice while preserving the dignity of the human person and not resorting to violence as a means to achieve your goals. So the very philosophy of ahimsa and non-violence that was formulated as part of his larger philosophy, and that of truth force, of getting the masses to agitate against an inhumane system. As I said, his very first experience in leading a civil disobedience campaign took place in South Africa, when over 3,000 Indians marched to get under the leadership of Gandhi to burn the birth certificate as a sign of protest in terms of the discriminatory laws imposed on the Indian community there. So the civil disobedience movement that was later to be such a major part of India's freedom struggle started in South Africa. So you can see that all of this, by the time, of course, I became a student and a political activist, we had this rich history that dates back to the very time that Indians came to South Africa penniless, because they came there as slave labor. They built their own schools because government didn't provide education. They built their own cultural facilities, their own temples and masjids to nourish and keep alive their culture and their tradition, and took care of themselves. So from a very early period, they realized that in order to succeed in life, you need to take care of yourself. And don't wait for people to give you handouts to build your future. You must start being the architects of your future yourself. And I think that is what gave the Indian community that had almost nothing to become such a formidable and powerful force in terms of the role they played in shaping the democratic free South Africa we have today. So, of course, it was painful. As a child, I recall very often, as is traditional, I would accompany my mom going on shopping, and we would go to what in London they call the High Street. We had that in South Africa, where all your upmarket shops and shopping district was. And we'd have to wait for my dad to come and pick us up. But they would have benches where people could sit on the side of the road if they were tired. But it would be marked for whites only. So as a child, you get tired, shopping. And then you'd want to sit down. And my mom would tell me, but you can't sit there. And I'd say, but why? I couldn't understand that only white people could sit on the chair. I'm giving you a very simple example. Or Durban is on the seacoast. We have beautiful beaches. We couldn't just go and swim at any beach because every beach was demarcated. The whites had the best of the beaches. The prime location was only for whites. They could only swim there. They could only surf there. They could only sunbathe there. We couldn't even put our foot on that sand. Then coloreds were given a certain beach and only coloreds could go there. Even as blacks, we couldn't, as an Indian, go to the colored beach. Indians had their own beach. Africans had their own beach. Traveling in public transport, Indians had to travel in buses for Indians. It's today, when you look back at it, it sounds, is this possible that this happened in this day and age? But that's how apartheid was. So it was a difficult period, but I think one learns lessons from these to appreciate, as you say in India, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the world is truly one family. But the apartheid tried to prove that the world is divided on the basis of race. And I think us overcoming that regime demonstrates what we call in Africa the same philosophy. I am because we are. That my identity is linked to that of the totality. So these are the lessons I think we draw from that experience. But we still are a nation in in the making. I think we are a learning nation. We are a young democracy, just 3 decades old. And the devastation of apartheid will take generations to finally to grow out of that and to get our society to the level where everyone enjoys the same privileges and benefits. Because the majority community were denied basic fundamental human rights and basic needs of living. And that takes a while to address. And I think that's what we are busy with in terms of our nation-building exercise, to create a harmonious, integrated South African society.
So how was your childhood, apart from the very apparent apartheid and liberation struggle that was going on? Were there any happy moments or something that you would like to live again?
Well, as I said, I have wonderful memories of my childhood, despite the larger challenges in the society that we lived in. In a sense, being what unintentionally the apartheid regime did by keeping the Indian community intact, because we had to live in areas designated for us. It created a sense of community. Because of the devastation of apartheid and the repressive regime, as an Indian community, we found solace amongst ourselves. And how did we preserve that? A major part, and perhaps that's where my interest in religion started, a major part of my early life was my parents would observe daily rituals, puja at home, lighting of the diya and doing prayers, and observing the major Hindu festivals, fasting during Krishnastami, for example, or during Navaratri, and having big pujas where the Pandit will come and you make sweetmeats and all of these things. So it gives you a sense of cultural identity and security in an insecure political environment. So those are fond memories. But at the same time, I think I came from a family, both my mom and dad didn't have the opportunity to complete the schooling for the various challenges that existed in community life at that time. But my parents were very, very adamant that we are 5 children. We are 3 brothers and 2 sisters, that we all must get proper education. So especially my father was very strict that we must do well at school and that we must go to university. Even if it was difficult for him to get us all through university, they made sacrifices, because I think at that time we perhaps didn't understand fully why they felt it was so important for us to get a proper education and to go on to university. So all 5 of us went on and got university degrees and then became professionals. So I think that's something I'm very grateful for, in that my parents instilled in me the value of getting a good education. Because as President Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon that can be used to change the world. And that holds true today. And I think our parents recognized that in a very difficult country and environment where you had the umbrella of discrimination and apartheid, that being of Indian origin, being a black person, that in order for you to succeed in society, you had to make sure that you are well equipped, and education was the key to that. And the Indian community in general put a lot of attention. Even though they were poor, they would sacrifice whatever few rupees they had in the pocket to ensure that their children got a good education. And that is why you'll see today, there's no Indian cutting sugarcane in South Africa. The community is fairly well established. You've had Indians that have served as ministers in government, holding very senior positions in government. They are involved in big business. They are involved in all sectors of society, the professionals leading hospitals, business schools, business houses. And that's because of the emphasis on education. So I think education is a key to the success of any society. And that's something, that is why universities become such powerful centers in the progress of any country. You may have richness in terms of natural resources, but if you do not, your most important treasure is your people. Your people are your greatest assets. And how do you make that asset work for the development of your country? You do that by empowering your people, by providing them education fit for purpose. And I say this deliberately, your education must be fit for purpose. That is not just getting a degree. And I see this in the brief exposure I've had to Woxsen University, that it's not just about students getting the degree. That's an important dimension, that they need that qualification. But it's a more integrated approach to education, that while you are studying, I met many of the students today that are chair of various organizations, structures that you have created. So they are getting in-house learning and experience on leadership, on management, on interacting with your colleagues and people. So there's a multidimensional approach to learning, more than just book learning and getting your degree. And I think that's the future direction of education. I may be a student of business science, but for me to be successful in business science, I need to have a wider knowledge of the world around me and what is happening in this world around me. We live in an integrated world. When we speak of a globalized world, it's globalization in every sense of the word, and that is globalization of knowledge as well. That knowledge is integrated today.
So you spoke about universities being academic spaces quite a lot, which I agree with completely. Do you think that universities should also be spaces for social responsibilities, like when professors want to speak about having political opinions? Do you think universities should also promote these opinions?
Well, I think one of the strengths of our societies, when I speak of our societies, I'm speaking of India and South Africa. We come from democratic backgrounds and democratic traditions. Right. So from the time we are born into this earth, our nurturing within the family system is under a democratic system. Whether you're living in a joint family or an extended community, it's always about the totality. It's not a command-driven process where you are taught that you must think this way, that this is right, that this is black or white. There's no such thing as black or white. There's many shades of gray in between. And this is the tradition we've been brought up in, to think freely, to encourage creative thinking, and to have free-flowing dialogue amongst ourselves. And I think that's the strength of Indian society as it is of South African society. And I think a university has to be a space that encourages that, not only amongst students, amongst yourselves, but in the interaction between student and lecturer. That it's not just about the lecturer coming and giving a lecture. I think it's equally important for the lecturer to listen to the views of the student. Because I always believe, as if you look at the opening page of my PhD thesis, it's a quote from Sri Ramakrishna. As long as I live, so long do I learn. There's no end to learning. No matter how many degrees I may have, I learn every day. And that learning doesn't come just from books. It comes from interaction with those that may not have so many degrees as me or the experience as me. But everyone has something to teach each other. And I think listening and observing and giving space for all views to flow, even if you disagree with it. And one of the things, when I put on Indian TV that fascinates me is that you'll have the anchor and the panelists. And very often all of them are talking simultaneously, even shouting at each other. But what I like is they're given the space to shout at each other. They're given the space to disagree with each other. But at the end of it all, there's a civility about it. You acknowledge that you had a good discussion, but everyone feels fulfilled that I had an opportunity to articulate my views. And even if it's shot down by the other person, he had to listen to my views and I had to listen to him. And I think that's what the vibrancy of a university is. And it must encourage that kind of environment. And I think the universities of today must understand they do not live in isolation. A university is not some building in some few hectares that's away from the city or within the city in the confines of the campus community. No, you are the center of society. Because where do the leaders of society come from? It comes from here. This is the platform where you nurture, not just leaders, even the so-called followers, those that are equipped to go into society and make a difference. And if a university fails to do that, then there's something wrong with the establishment, because you are at the center of any society, because it is here where knowledge is generated, it is here where ideas are generated, it is here where creative thinking emanates from, and this is then diffused into larger society. So I think the university is an integral part of larger society today. Gone are the days when we go to a university, we get a degree and then go and start looking for a job. That happens simultaneously. You are being trained while you are here, getting your degree on your role in society already. And the private sector, the civil society, you have to have a constant nourishment. I'm very pleased that I have this opportunity to come to the university, that I'm not just a diplomat sitting in Delhi interacting with the foreign ministry or the other government departments or amongst my fellow diplomats. I think it's so important that you give me this platform to come and speak to your students, your lecturers, and for them to get an opportunity to also listen to my views. So I think this is the kind of cross-pollination that we need in society today. Nothing exists in isolation. A university is an integral part that's plugged into all sectors of society, and it has to be that way.
That is right. So the communicative and, being able to express your opinions, that kind of environment will be best found in a BA liberal arts classroom, is what I personally think. Now, talking about BA in liberal arts, our university is one where the majority of students are maybe in tech background, in finance. This creates a lot of anxiousness in the minds of us BA students, thinking, will we ever be accomplished? Will we ever find a good, stable job? So while you were completing your BA degree, did you ever face these kind of doubts in your mind that would you be able to do something with the degree?
We live in this age of AI and robotics. And very often you have this debate, is AI going to replace jobs? Is it going to replace the human being's presence in whatever the field is? And when you look at the future of work, very often top of the box in this age of AI is the soft skills, the very thing that you're talking about in terms of the humanities. That is what you need, even in this day and age, underpinned by new technologies, AI and so forth, that you cannot replace. You cannot replace. Because you go to any workplace today, a successful workplace is where you have a harmonious environment, where the head, if I look at my embassy, I'm the ambassador. I've been put there to give direction, right? But I'm there to also nurture the others so that we work as a team. I can only be successful because of my team. If I think the South African embassy can be a highly successful, well-recognized, highly regarded embassy just because of me, it won't work. I need every one of them to work with me to make this happen. And that's what I constantly instill. So there is no discipline that is superior and disciplines that are inferior. So for a scientist who has no knowledge and totally ignores the humanities, you can't be a successful scientist. Look at Abdul Kalam, the role he played as your chief scientist, right? But he was a humanitarian. He was a humanitarian, first and foremost, more than a scientist. because it is his humanism that made him a successful scientist. His books, he writes about that himself. So whatever discipline you may be in, don't think that it is inferior to other disciplines, right? We live in the day and age of IT, new technologies, but that doesn't mean it's a superior discipline than the others. It doesn't. All of them that are involved in these disciplines, and many universities are doing this today. Even my daughter, when she was studying medicine, she had to do certain humanitarian causes from the humanities. Because in order to understand your patient, you have to also have some knowledge of the human sciences. You can only be a successful medical doctor, not just by focusing on medical science. The human sciences and humanities must complement that.
Ambassador, when you were growing up, as a child, you know how we have dreams that I will change the world, I will change this thing about it, I will be so big and I will do this. Did you ever, seeing the injustices around the system, feel I will change that?
Well, I always was a person that dreamt. As I said, when I finished my diploma and I started teaching, I taught for a year and then I said, no, this is not enough for me. I want to improve myself. I want to study further. So while I was teaching, I started studying part-time. And that was the beginning. I just carried on until I got my PhD, a second PhD. I even did a postdoctoral program and so forth and so forth. Because I think once you have dreams and ambition, and I always told my students, the first-year students that should come to my classes, I told them, already seated here are MA and PhDs sitting in front of me, right? Because when you take the seed, put it in the ground and you start nourishing it, you get the tree and then you get the fruits. So the PhD is in each one of you already. The lecturer is a medium who's watering the garden and nourishing that plant so that you have a fruit there. And therefore, every one of us, it's firstly belief in yourself. It starts with you. Don't expect the lecturer to come there and make you a PhD graduate. The lecturer is a medium that's going to help you on that journey to realize your potential. So I always had a dream. And I was relating earlier on when my wife and I were still students at university. And one day she asked me, what would you like in life? In terms of career. I said, I have two dreams. And this, I think I was an undergraduate student. I said, I have two dreams. I want to be a professor and I want to be a diplomat. I want to be ambassador of my country. And professor, I didn't have doubts about that because I knew that I was driven. I knew that I'm going to study and I would become a lecturer. But diplomat, it was more aspirational and more a dream because in those days, apartheid was so deeply entrenched. And even we were not sure whether we'll see freedom in our lifetime. But it didn't stop me from dreaming because I say if you stop dreaming, you die immediately. You must have dreams and aspirations. And someone told me quite early in my career, he said, don't just aim for the stars, aim for the Milky Way. And I always remember that. That don't put a ceiling on your dreams. Let it be as wide as you want it to, because that gives you the room to grow into it. If you put a ceiling, then you're limiting yourself. So, yes, I had those dreams, and I'm fortunate that in my lifetime I was able to achieve both those dreams from a career point of view. But it's also the determination and, as I said, the belief in yourself first and foremost. You must believe in yourself. And that only comes by fortifying yourself. And education is an important part of that. Your family and your commitment to family and community is an important part of that. And also the people around you, because you're not living in isolation. All those around you nourish you, from your parents to your larger family, to your community, to your society and your country. And I think seeing yourself as an important entity, I was saying earlier on, every drop of water forms the ocean. There's no one drop can say, I'm more important than you. Because every one of them are important to create an ocean. And you have an ocean only because you have all those drops that contribute to the totality of it. So in society, whatever your vocation and your place in society is, and I say this to my staff at the embassy, it doesn't matter if you are there to ensure the embassy is clean. Because if I take the cleaner away, I will have a filthy embassy. Right? If you want Swachh Bharat, all of us have to clean the country. So he or she has an important role to play. So when I get a visitor, they're impressed. Look at how clean and how pleasant this embassy is. So he or she has a very important role to play, as much as I as a diplomat have a role to play. So everyone in society makes a contribution to the success of the society and the success of the country.
I'm sure your journey must be quite an aspirational pursuit, as you put it, because as we were talking about apartheid in our previous conversations, you did mention that only the white, most elite people were allowed to join the top universities. But the university that you've been in, it's one of the top 5. So
yes, I was also saying this earlier on to some students. You know, we've all come out of colonialism. We are sovereign, independent nations today. Africa, Asia, Latin America. So we've got political emancipation. But we still have challenges because in many of our countries, South Africa and India included, there is still, I think, a process of decolonization of the mind, where we need to believe in ourselves, we need to have faith in our own countries, in our own institutions, in our own structures. I've had the privilege of being educated under apartheid education. And our universities, those that were so-called black universities, was seen as being inferior universities to the white mainstream universities. But I've had the privilege of teaching at several universities. I've given guest lectures at universities in the USA and Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, several African countries, several in India, I've lost count, China, and I've held my own based on my education. So the education I received from my university, I don't see it as being inferior to any other. Whether someone comes today, there's still this kind of obsession that you must go to Oxford, Stanford, or MIT. Those are the best institutions in the world. Look at your own country. Most of the major global multinationals today, be it Google, Amazon, IBM, PepsiCo, whatever, they're all headed by Indian nationals that were graduates of IITs.
yeah.
IITs. Where do you hear of people saying, oh, I'm a graduate of IIT? But you'll hear, I'm from MIT, I'm from Columbia, I'm from this or that. So we need to also have faith in our universities as being on the same level, and in many cases even superior to many of the institutions of the global north that we think are always the best institutions. And I think Woxsen University is an example of that. What I've seen here, I've been deeply impressed, and I'm sure you, as graduates of this university, many of you will go to lead global multinationals, play a major role in your society, in your country. I have no doubt about that.
The hope is there.
Yes.
All right. So I have one last question for you. If you had to go back to when you were starting out your career and you had to give yourself one advice which could maybe also help the others starting out our careers now, what would that be?
Well, if I have to, I've been very fortunate, as I've said, when I look back and reflect on the journey that I've traveled. The only advice I would have for myself, if I had to look back at the young Anil growing up, is that in school I didn't take education seriously. I gave my parents a lot of trouble. And they impressed upon me the value of education. I didn't realize that at school. It's only when I went to university and I perhaps had epiphany then, recognizing that education is the key to the future. So the advice I would give to students today is you have this privilege of being at a university, of receiving formal education. There are millions of children in the world today that have no access to education. So education is really a privilege. Don't take it for granted. Embrace it and make the best and get the maximum mileage during your time at university to learn as much as possible, to get as much as possible experience, and to make as much friendships as possible, because life is about networking and not just coming here, getting your degree and going. It's creating lifelong bonds, and the university environment gives you that in preparing for the future. And those are some of the things perhaps I would change. I should have networked a bit more. But more importantly, I think recognizing the importance and value of education in shaping your life and shaping the life of your community and your country.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your kind words about the university, your urgence to pursue a good education, and the way that you have, visualized the entire apartheid struggle and also brought in religion into it. It's quite inspirational. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Wasn't that an amazing conversation? We got to know of a student, a professor, and a diplomat who is now the voice of South Africa. I hope you enjoyed listening to him, because I did. And watch out for our next episode in the Woxsen Podcast series.